is meeting in Brandywine, FG. This is Introduction to Advanced Dancing. My name is Dave Taylor. I'm your moderator for this panel. And starting over at my extreme left is Jim Mayo, one of the panel members. Jim, is it Massachusetts? You still in Massachusetts? New Hampshire. I thought that was something different there. Hampstead, New Hampshire is where Jim Mayo makes his home. And he's I'll be all right. He's a panel member. Next to him from New York is Lee Kopman. Jim Mayo is on the panel as someone who has very recently come into advanced dancing and is starting Introduction to Advanced. Lee Kopman, of course, has had many, many years of experience in the advanced dancing field. And actually, I will be acting as your moderator to handle and field questions and whatever after that. You have a presentation you want to make first, don't you? You have any presentation? Okay. We'll introduce first Lee Kopman, who will be your first panelist.
Thank you, Dave. The topic for today is dancers' prime consideration. Let me just pose a question to the group here. How many here think we have a problem in terms of the advanced level movement in square dancing? All right. We're going to find out what you think those problems are. We'll try to deal with them, try to answer your questions. There is probably no easy solution. We'll air what the problems are in the different areas. We'll find out what our interests are. And then probably later in the session, after we deal with some of these general so-called problems, we'll try to handle some of the specifics in terms of choreography. I think we do have problems in dancing, specifically the advanced level section. I have some feelings about the problems that we have along the mainstream lines, and maybe we can deal with that a little bit later. But the thing that we should realize and recognize is that the advanced level movement is growing. There's a lot of interest in it. People want to know about it. Callers want to know about it. And we have to, as leaders in the field, we have to know how to deal with it. Those that have attended the recent national square dance conventions have seen that when we start to get involved in a room that has advanced level dancing, I think in Seattle we had almost 100 sets that got involved. Just a few years ago, we were lucky to get 10 or 15 sets. 100 squares means that there's a lot of interest. Recently, I think it happened in Seattle also, they had the C1 dancing assigned to a room that could hold 35 sets, and 65 squares attended. So the point I'm trying to make is that the interest is there. I have been lucky enough at the last 5 or 6 national square dance conventions to be responsible for introducing advanced level dancing to the mainstream dancers. And whenever I've been involved, we've had to deal with at least 400 to 600 squares. Now that's a lot of people to handle. Can you imagine collecting $3 a couple at that setup? I never really had the opportunity to do that. The point is that the interest is there, and we as leaders are responsible to respond to those interests. There's no question about that. And how we respond to it is important. It's important because our basic responsibility is to service dancers, regardless of what your likes and dislikes are. I know many of us run into dancers, organizers, program chairmen that program based on their likes and dislikes. And if they just choose to deal with mainstream dancers, then those that get involved in the advanced level program will suffer. Suffer in terms of who's assigned to call for them, suffer in terms of what area we will be dancing in. And I think that the bottom line is the interest, the numbers, and whether or not we are honest and not just giving lip service to the fact that that interest does exist. Now, we as callers have a responsibility. If you're going to teach advanced level dancing, I think you should know how to dance advanced level dancing. There's no shortcut for that. And so many times I've been involved in caller schools myself as an instructor, where we deal with not advanced level dancing, but primarily just, no, I shouldn't say just, with mainstream dancing. And one of the things that I find the most aggravating of all is when you're calling to a group of callers at a caller school and they can't function at a mainstream level. And here we're leaders and we're responsible to teach these things to dancers. So if you're going to get involved, you have to learn how to dance the things you're going to teach. You have to get a feeling for it. Now, the advanced level figures, they flow just as well as a mainstream figure. My contention is this: if you can swing through and spin the top, you can do an AC-doocy to a trade circulate. They're just two different moves. Now, from your standpoint, how are you supposed to deal with this? Number one, you have to be honest with yourself. Can you handle calling above a mainstream level or a mainstream plus level? Do you have a feel for it? Do you understand it? Do you know what the figures do? Once you do some soul searching and you decide whether or not you can handle this kind of calling, then you have to ask yourself whether or not the dancers you're dealing with are interested in this kind of calling. Can they handle it? And at that point, somewhere along the line, you're going to have to make a move. If you have dancers that have been dancing to you for a number of years, and they say to you, geez, I would like to learn some advanced level calling, what are your options? Well, your options are you either learn it yourself and teach it to them, or you send it to a guy down the street. You may not be so, you probably would be hesitant to do that. And it might turn you off. But then again, you have to realize what your responsibilities of being a leader are. And that is specifically, just one, is to service your dancers. If you can't handle a particular level of interest that they have, then it's up to you to guide them and let them know where they can learn that particular level of dancing that they're interested in. My suggestion to you, with the interest in the activity the way it is now, with the excitement it seems to generate, with the numbers that are starting to show up, with the number of tapes that advanced and challenge callers are sending out. And why are they sending it out? Let me just back up just a little bit. The reason they're sending it out is because callers in certain areas have no interest or do not have the capability to deal with that kind of dancing in their area. And if you don't have callers in an area to teach dancers that want to learn how to do advanced level dancing, then what do? They have to go to some kind of a tape service to find out how to learn how to dance. And they do. Our tapes, not mine specifically, but I'm talking about the advanced challenge callers that deal with tapes. We are literally shipping these tapes all over the world because callers in a given area are not interested or they just don't have the ability to handle that particular level of interest. So somebody has to deal with them. In effect, I may become a local caller for the dancers in your area, even if you live in California. That's exactly what's happening. And the only way you could avoid that, if you so choose to, is to find out something about the movement, how it's done, and learn how to dance it and do it yourself. Now, how do you, as a caller, learn how to do this? Well, I don't think I've seen any school set up specifically for teaching callers how to do advanced level calling. Probably down the road in the near future, some plans are being made to do that. But at this point now, the schools primarily concern themselves with basic calling, good calling, at mainstream plus level. Of course, we get involved with advanced level discussions when we're at schools, but specifically, there is nothing that deals with learning how to do advanced level calling. So your responsibility is the same as the dancers, in terms of what their interests are. If you want to learn it, I suggest when they buy the tapes, you go to the tape sessions and learn how to do it. Learn how to dance those figures. And when you start to get a feeling for it, anybody that you know in the business of doing advanced level calling is somebody that you should be in touch with. A teaching technique, whether or not this figure is appropriate, a new experimental that comes out, is it the kind of thing we want to deal with? There are callers all over that do advanced calling that are more than willing to give you assistance in terms of how to deal with some of these figures. That's my opening statement. Okay?
Thank you, Lee. You've really been growing under my guidance. You're doing a good job. I'm proud of you. Taught him everything he knows. Took me 15 seconds. At this time, I'll introduce Jim Mayo.
I suspect that many of you, particularly those who've known me over the years, may be wondering what I'm doing here. I'm wondering a little bit myself, but I feel it's important to say to you some explanation for that. I served as CALLERLAB's chairman of the BASIC program committee for a number of years, and in the process acquired for myself the apparent reputation as being opposed to levels that were more advanced than BASIC. I would encourage everyone, and I suspect I'm preaching to the choir here, but I would encourage everyone to recognize that square dancing is a recreation which incorporates and makes available an active recreational program suitable for a tremendous range of interests, all the way from traditional, which will permit people to participate on an occasional basis, to the more advanced levels and on into challenge, which requires a considerably greater dedication to the recreation than many people are prepared to put in. Because someone finds it enjoyable to work at any one of these levels does not necessarily imply that they are not interested in, comfortable with, supportive toward any other level. And one of the best examples that comes to mind is Rusty McLean from our area, who is involved in advanced and some challenge dancing, but also thoroughly enjoys dancing contras and traditional. I think there's no need for us to regard any of these as exclusive. I have recently concluded myself that basic programs are not viable at this time in square dancing. That's not to say that they won't work sometime in the future or that they're not a useful thing to pursue, but right now they're not viable, and as a consequence I have found myself with some time available. I recognize, my personal point of view is that in the past we have encountered problems in square dancing because we have attempted to hold people down, to prevent them from exercising their interest in more complicated forms of square dancing. And Lee talks about the resistance to dancers moving on from your groups into more advanced programs. I would urge you, any of you who are not yet involved in advanced, to recognize that your efforts to restrain people from moving out of a mainstream or plus level program into something that interests them and involves them more actively are poorly based. They will cause you more trouble in your mainstream and plus programs than you want. They will pressure you constantly to serve their interests, and doing that within the framework of a mainstream or plus program is an error for everyone. And so we ought to confront the fact that when there is an interest in your groups in a greater level of complexity for some of the people, the best thing you can do for everyone, yourself, the group that they're in, and those dancers, is to find some way to service their interest in a different form of square dance programming. Even, I suspect, in those remote areas where there are not large numbers of people, and Lee posed to me the question before we started of what if you've only got a couple of sets in your group? I have never seen a square dance program anywhere that has not thrown away more people than they have in it. By the end of the third year of any square dance program, more people have dropped out for whatever reason than you have taught. And I know of very few exceptions to that. One of the reasons for dropout that we have overlooked, we've kept saying to people drop out of square dancing because they are pushed too hard. That's one reason. But it's also true that a number of people over the years have dropped out of square dancing because they could not find an outlet for their interest in something more challenging, more demanding. We get dropouts from both ends. Let us not throw away people who have an interest in more complicated things. I have recently turned to starting an advanced program, and I'd like to reinforce Lee's suggestion that those who are involved are your best source of information. It's very difficult to start in a vacuum and commence to call the programs. I found it particularly interesting because I teach callers a fair amount, and one of the things I discovered as I started into this new program for me is that I'm confronted with a group of 27 then calls that I have not been working with. And it provided me with the experience that I'm sure confronts somebody starting into calling. There's a whole lot of choreography with which they are not familiar, and the only way to begin is to begin. Sometime you have to start calling for real people. And granted that the background of many years of calling at a different level is helpful, learning to deal with different terminology and different formations is a challenging process. It gave me a great deal of respect for some of the people who've been through my caller schools recently. It's not easy. One of the sources of considerable help in my area was Don Beck, who has been working with advanced material, and he was always willing to answer my questions. One of the things that I found that I needed him for the most was to try to establish what the common usage was for these terms. If you start to teach a term and you don't know what the usual formation, starting formation is for, or starting arrangement is for a particular call, you have no idea what comprises all position and what doesn't comprise all position. And Don was very helpful. He wrote out for me a list of the calls with the most common usage that they were receiving in our area. I think of all the help I had in starting into the process, that was the most important. You can read the definitions, but learning how to work with them so that the people who learn from you will have the best chance they can have in entering the program is a very difficult thing to do. I don't want to go on at great length. I think you want to hear more from Lee about the choreography issues, but let me say again that if you have dancers that are ready, I agree with Lee absolutely. You have a choice. You may either service their needs or not. If you choose not to, fret not about their departure into other programs. I really believe that's to your advantage, even if it cuts the size of your group, because it provides you with the opportunity to build that group without having to compromise the interests of the people who properly belong in either a mainstream or plus program, to try to serve the needs of people who belong in an advanced program. Don't be resistive. Don't be reluctant to encourage them to the guy down the street if you don't want to do it. But if you do want to do it, it's fun, and you can learn how. Try it. You'll like it.
Thank you, Jim. I just for a moment wanted to add something before we turn this over to Lee. I think Jim mentioned fun, and a few things he mentioned kind of triggered my memory. There are times, I think, all of us as callers tend to reach a plateau where we get kind of stagnant. And I confess to you that that happened to me, and at one time I was really found out that for the past 5 years, I hadn't called 5 years. I had called one dance 5 years, almost every week, and it began to get boring to me. Through listening to some of the people who did want to go on into bigger and newer horizons, it kind of revitalized my calling, got my interest again, got the adrenaline going. And it could happen to some of you, too. I think it becomes very interesting, and as you begin to find out little new things for yourself that seem to work and please the dancers. And I think it gives you a stimulation that all of us need from time to time. Basically, this entire panel is more or less kind of built around Lee's presentation, so I don't want to take much more of your time. Lee has suggested that we open it up for questioning first before and see if there are any questions that you would like to address to our panelists.
We'll go to the microphone.
Yes, and if so, please go to the microphone. This session is being taped, and we would like you to step before the microphone, state your name and the area from which you come and to which panelist you would like to address your question. Don't all rush at once.
I'm Danny Payne from Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. And I'd like to get the impression of you gentlemen that are conducting this session today with respect to what I perceive as at least a temporary problem for square dancing in general that's created by our levels. I'd like to preface my remarks with the fact that I do call A1 and A2 and advanced C1, and I enjoy thoroughly what I do, and it has provided a lot of fun for me and my wife. But I do perceive a problem in that I have seen more dancers exiting the levels below than have been brought into the activity and stay with it at the beginning level. And I also see dancers that 2 years ago, a number of them, that were out supporting and bringing people into beginners classes that no longer do so, some of them through lack of desire once they get into the higher levels, and others just through not having time to, through the sheer time requirement, if you will, for learning to dance at the higher levels. How do you see this affecting the future of activity?
You probably won't believe this statement I'm going to make, but I think our biggest problem in the dance movement today is not so much that we have the advanced and the challenge levels, but the fact that we're really not taking care of the mainstream dancers. Now, when you go out of here, you'll probably say that I had said this, and it's hard to believe, but I really feel that way. We've talked about it at home. And I think that we are really not caring enough for those mainstream dancers. Now, that's a specific answer to your question. Yeah, well, just 1 second, okay? As I get around, I see that the dropout rate. Now, I don't have any stats on this, and I haven't done a study. I don't think anybody has. But the dropout rates at the mainstream level seem to be a little bit greater than the dropout rate at the advanced level. I think the advanced level dancer has a tendency to stay in a little bit longer than the mainstream dancer. Now, we have said before, and we can spar back and forth on this. When the advanced movement came into being, people said it was the worst thing that ever happened. That was one school of thought. Then on the other side, those that were involved said it was the best thing that happened because it kept dancers interested in the activity. And we can talk about that, but nobody has ever really done a study on it. But I think it's a problem, and I think that sometimes in our rush as leaders to pick up something that seems to be growing and exciting, not that mainstream is not exciting, don't take that, but in our rush to try to get on this bandwagon, to try to service those dancers that are interested in advanced level dancing, we're forgetting a little bit about how it all began and where the emphasis really should be in order to, get them in and keep them in there. And we rush to start an advanced level class, or we rush, if you're really interested, to learn how to do advanced level dancing yourself, and you take a night away from yourself. So before you know it, you're dancing yourself to learn the movement, you're studying through tapes, you're teaching an advanced level group, and you give up a night. What night do you give? Probably the night that doesn't give you the biggest return, the bottom line. And you might cut out a beginner's class. Why? Well, we only have 2 squares. But for years you worked with 2 squares. But now it's a different story. We've got to take care of the advanced level dancers. But it's a concern for us. And I think that we have to do some serious soul searching and set aside the time. Believe it or not, this year I've been doing a mainstream plus dance on Long Island. It's the first time in about 15 years that I started it. And I'm happy with it. I like to call it. Doesn't matter whether I call it for beginners or C4. It doesn't matter to me. But I just felt that there was an obligation, that I had an obligation to square dancing in the area. I'm not trying to color this up and put out all kinds of flowers for Lee Kopman, but I just feel as if sometimes we have to say, whoa, because this bottom is going to fall out in about 10 years. We're dealing with advanced now. Everybody's excited. You're trying to pick it up. You can see where a lot of the action is, but we're really not taking care of what has to be taken care of down at the lower end. Okay? Yes?
Hal Greenlee from Erie, Pennsylvania. I'd like the panel to address the question, what is the proper placing of singing calls in the advanced program? It seems to be mostly directed towards the hash calling without the other, what I feel is an important part of dancing to music that you get in singing calls.
Are you saying in terms of patterning, hashing up the singing calls? Is that what you're talking about?
My question is, in the advanced program,
right,
is there a place for singing calls? I talked to some advanced callers, and they say, well, maybe one an evening, or maybe two. In my personal opinion, it's an extension of the Plus program, and therefore it should be a rounded program, both hash and singing calls. The singing calls, the choreography that's used to be using advanced material in the singing calls.
I think you got two questions here. Number one, should we call singing calls at an advanced level dance? And if we are calling singing calls, should we hash up the singing calls? Are there two questions like that?
No, my question
just whether or not we should deal with it.
Should we deal with singing calls at the advanced level? Say I'm going to a festival, Lee, and I'm billed to call an advanced hour. Should I assume that that's totally hash, or that it's hash and singing calls?
Well, I think
singing calls using advanced material.
I think that's a personal feeling that you have yourself towards the hour. I would not. At advanced level sessions, I might end the session with a singing call. I would not begin it. The advanced level session deals with just a volume of material that they're excited about trying out for the first time with a new fresh caller if they've never danced to you. So I personally would not deal with that and do the singing call. I would do it maybe at the end, but certainly not during the hour. That's how I handle it.
Could I ask Jim or Dave what their opinion is on it?
Yeah, I take a very different view of that. I think singing calls are part of square dancing, and I like them as a programming tool in dealing with dancers at any level. I include them in my advanced program. My dancers seem to enjoy them. I see no reason not to include them. I use advanced material in those singing calls. In teaching, they're as useful to me there as they are in the basic program.
In my teaching of advanced workshops, I always use singing calls, and I do them every tip. However, probably much as some of you have, I have worked out the little things where you can do a partner change with a pass and roll your neighbor and spread, or a pass and roll your neighbor, and I use that as rote for drill so that they get floor time. And to answer your question about festivals, normally when I go to a festival, maybe I'm a little gun shy, but I do not do the singing calls at a festival where it's marked advanced. I find that at festivals, usually in the advanced room, you get people who are rather well at executing the movements. But I did want to say that recently at a festival, just a couple of weeks ago in Washington, I was rather surprised, and I don't think all dancers, we have a tendency to say all the dancers don't want singing calls in advance, and I was in there for the second time, and probably the most efficient square, which was challenge people, yelled out, "Don't you do singing calls?" And I said, "Yeah." So we'll do one. So I did. Then I knew I was doing the proper thing when they asked.
Yeah, after he did the singing call, they asked him not to do any more after that.
You're right. The lady that asked for it, when I got all through, and I walked down, she walked up and she says, "Well, that's enough of that."
My name's Clark Baker from Watertown, Massachusetts. I guess that I kind of had two questions. The first one was directed toward Jim Mayo. He kind of was in contradiction with what Lee did in terms of he didn't learn to dance advanced first and then go teach it. He obviously needed help from somebody. Maybe he didn't have the time or so forth. I feel a lot of other callers who are interested in advanced are in the same position Jim was in, and wondered if you'd have a little bit of comments about, did he feel that he really should have learned advanced first, or danced in a tape group, or danced at someone else's live dance or something. The second question is for both Jim and Dave, and that is, could you comment on how learning and calling advanced has improved or changed your mainstream and plus choreography?
First yes, I certainly think it would be wonderful if you could find the time to learn to dance a program before you start to teach it. You're right, I didn't have the available night, and I did want to service those dancers, and I was interested in taking the program myself. So I did a lot of diagramming. What I in fact did was to take the Hilton deck and go through and diagram each one of those cards, and using my experience from other programs, tried to make judgments about which were reasonable, which were the most likely to be successful. I did not agree in every case with their order. Of course, you need to know what the call accomplishes before you can use it in any program. I could not agree more that you should dance it first. I didn't have the opportunity, and it's possible to learn by teaching, as many of us did it at the basic level. You know, that's, I don't recommend it, but it's in fact how most of us start to call. You get a group and start teaching them. I probably sacrificed some dancers in the process, although I think, so far as I know, no one that I have taught advanced dancing to has yet dropped out of the activity in the 3 years I've been involved.
There was a question about your plus calling, your choreography.
I don't have I've heard a lot of callers say that it improves their calling. I don't have that feeling at all. I work with those calls in the same way that I worked with the calls at the plus level. I don't really feel that my plus level activity improves my mainstream activity. I see those as very different programming problems.
Clark, on the first question, what was the first question? I'm not a memory caller.
Actually, I didn't ask you the first question, but I would be interested in knowing.
No wonder I forgot it.
Did you dance advanced before you started calling it?
No, I did not, Clark. I did. I think there is a slight difference, however. We're talking about people going into intro, into advanced. I feel a caller who has had the number of years of experience that I had, I was able to understand the movements, believe it or not, through teaching it. I could then go out and dance it. I became an advanced with the people, and I don't mean to digress a little bit, but I think if square dancing is kept fun, and by that, usually we mean low level, I don't mean that at all. And I wanted to tell you how I got into the challenge for the very same reason. If the people know that this is an area that, and they like you, and you like them, and you enjoy working with them, and you keep it fun, you can almost do anything you want with them, in my opinion, because the way I got into challenge, I didn't know I was going into challenge. The people that from the advanced group began to say, well, why don't we try this? And I'd say, I don't know it. I was just brutally honest about it, and they said, we can show it to you. We've done it on a tape, or we've done it here, and I said, oh. And I think Angie used to just really crack up in the back of the room one night when I think I began to teach Scoot and Plenty, and I turned out I was teaching Scoot and Ramble. And and the people said, hey, it doesn't go that way. I said, how's it go? And they told me. And I didn't realize until about, all of a sudden I was down at Kirkwood Lodge one time, and one of the callers brought me a C1 list, and I found out we were 2/3 through that. So I thought I might as well take them the other third, and I learned the first 2/3 from the dancers and the other third from myself. But they knew this. They laughed. They said, come on, we'll show you. And they enjoyed going along with me. To answer your second question, it's a little different than Jim's answer. Has it helped my choreographic performance, perhaps, in the plus field? And the answer is a resounding yes, because of one thing. Advanced calling and somewhat the challenge made me work. And as I was working these little checkers and finding what I thought is amazing get-outs, and I'm going to sell some of them sometime, I began to think of little things, in-roll, circulate to a right and left grand, woo, and I got all excited, until I saw the floor go down. But I did find out that dancers don't work as well as checkers. But they, as I taught them, they enjoyed these too. And when working with these checkers, Clark, I found some things that worked at the Plus program, and I threw them in. And it worked out very well for me. And the people in the Plus movement that I call to have told me that they really enjoyed my Plus calling since I got off my butt.
So many of the advanced level moves can be applied to the mainstream program, and they can be directed. And there are things that you probably would not have thought about unless you knew these moves that were on the advanced level list. Now, let me take one simple example. The Diamond Circulates is a mainstream plus call. Is that correct? Well, on the advanced level list, however, is a call called 6-2-AC-Deucey, which I'm quite sure many of you know how to do. Now, if you are studying the advanced level list, you're just getting into it, you could apply a 6-2-AC-Deucey without any specific name in terms of saying 6-2-AC-Deucey. If you know the move, even if you don't know the move, just picture in your own mind 2 diamonds. And you say the center person of the wave trade while the other 6 circulate around the outside. Now, if you were not familiar with the advanced level steps that we have, the definition of those steps, you probably would not think about that. But what it does is it opens up new avenues, new ideas for you on how to create at a level below the advanced level movement. Take as an example a horseshoe turn, which is not on the mainstream plus list. It's an advanced level call. Well, you may not have thought about it as strictly a mainstream plus caller, that, well, let's have the people looking out cloverleaf while the others do a partner tag. Now, by being exposed to an advanced level movement, you can bring that down into a mainstream plus program without saying do a horseshoe turn, and then do a 6-2-AC-Deucey or whatever the case is. The mix is an advanced level move. Once again, you may not think about having the centers cross run, which is part of the mainstream program, and the new centers trade, which is something that will give you things to think about when you start to deal with the mainstream plus movement. And those are great additions, and it's good for you, it's good for the dancers, it provides the kind of variety that you should want to create at your dances. Yes, Mike?
Mike Jacobs, Louisville, Kentucky. 2 specific comments on the opening remarks. First off, for the experienced mainstream plus caller that's getting into the advanced program, the one key thing is not to forget where you came from. What made you successful at mainstream and plus calling applies here too. I see guys at festivals coming into the advanced halls and calling, and they're good callers at mainstream and mainstream plus. If they come here and throw out everything that made them successful, they figure music no longer applies, they figure flowing motion dancing doesn't apply any longer because it's advanced level dancing. You've got to keep doing the things that made you good as a mainstream caller, that made you good as a plus caller, and it applies here. The second thing, and I wish I'd thought of it, but it happened in our area, was that another advanced level caller took a group of callers who were getting interested in doing some advanced, and instead of them going and dancing with dancers, there's some stigma sometimes that's attached to experienced callers returning to the dance level and making mistakes in front of dancers. He took them and 4 or 5 couples of callers and isolated them and let them learn advanced dancing that way. Not only that, but they then later on received specific assignments to call some advanced figures, and in that analysis, even though 4 of the 5 didn't become advanced callers later on, it improved their choreography and their appreciation of the mainstream and mainstream plus moves. So there's one alternative without necessarily going to tapes in your area.
One of the things I see, and I know that many of you have been involved in this, is you attend a major festival or some kind of a major square dance event in your area, and you have your rooms labeled advanced, mainstream, and so on. And then callers come in who are primarily not identified with advanced level calling, but they go in and in some way they're assigned to do an advanced level tip. Why? Because, well, we're all callers from the same area, let's give everybody a shot, and somebody goes in and they start to deal with us. And they start to call so hard that nobody can deal with it. It's just too difficult. They don't know what's happening, the dancers can't deal with it, it's just beyond their abilities to do it. I think some of the soul searching that we have to do, and you really have to be serious about this, this is probably one of the most important comments I'm going to make today. If you can't handle it, if you're not ready for it, don't go in and make a fool out of yourself. And don't give the dancers a hard time. There are dancers that are learning how to do advanced level dancing that put a lot of time into it. They have a tremendous dedication, just like everybody else. But they put a lot of work to learn 70 new figures That's a lot of material in order to succeed with. 70 new figures. And they put the time in, and they go into a room, and they want to be able to dance these figures. And it's going to do you more harm to go in there and try to make them look foolish and try to show them, well, even though I'm not identified with advanced level, I'll show them, and you'll call hard, and maybe some of the things you're calling really don't work because you don't understand it. So what I'm saying to you is be professional. Make sure your approach is one where you're honest about it, you do some real soul searching, and if the situation calls for you to sign up for any one of those rooms, if you're not able, if you haven't been trained, if you haven't danced one of those levels, don't just say, I'll take it, even if you can't do it, because you're going to come out smelling very bad in this whole setup. That's a very important item.
Do you have any other questions? Here comes someone to the microphone.
My name is Gary Brummage, I'm from Warren, Pennsylvania. I've been involved with advanced dancing for 10 years roughly, and called it off and on. I finally got my own group started about 2.5 years ago, and first group went through, and they went up and they danced to Hal Greenlee, and they got blown off the floor, and they came back and said, well, why didn't you teach us this? So Hal's people come down, and I blow them off the floor, and we're getting a little bit better, either Hal and I or our dancers are, I'm not sure. But the...
are you getting better blowing them off the floor, or...?
Well, not quite, but my question really involves, now that I've got my A2 people really well developed, and they're going out and they're dancing to Ed Foot, and they're coming back and saying, well, we actually did some of this stuff. We didn't just stand and watch.
You mean the only one that comes out smelling like a rose is Ed Foot?
Well, no, not exactly, but the point is, now that they're well developed and they're doing A2 stuff well, and even some of them are talking about going into the C1 level. I only have about 6 squares total, which comprises about 50% of my activity right now. I have about 12 squares of plus dancers, no mainstream dancers, and 6 squares of advanced. What's the best way to handle next year's incoming advanced crop?
Well, why would you want to change what you're starting now? You're teaching advanced level dancing now?
Yeah, what I have is my Friday night group. I teach A1 for 2 tips, then have 1 tip of full A2, while the new people get a chance to take a break. Now that we're doing 70% of all the advanced calls, we now just dance straight through, doing everybody together.
All right, now state your question again. Let's hear it.
Is that a valid way of going about handling, bringing new people into the advanced movement?
Well, you know, it happens at the mainstream level also. I mean, you run your mainstream dances or your mainstream plus dances, you teach the dancers, and then eventually you bring them into the movement. And there's really no difference in the way you deal with the advanced level program. You have an advanced level club, you're teaching dancers this year to do advanced level dancing, then they have to be absorbed into the advanced level group. Now, this may annoy some people that have been dancing the advanced level group, for this year. They have to start over again. Well, this is square dancing. That's the nature of the activity. If they're tired of starting over again, then it behooves you to try to start something above the A2 and then go into a C1 program. But it just pervades the whole activity. It's a full year of dancing. You have your summer workshop. You bring the new people in, then they have to start over again. Now, if they choose not to start over again, either you service them with another level, or they'll find another way to keep themselves happy in the activity.
One other question concerning what Jim had to say earlier, and that is, when I was dancing 10 years ago to tape groups, well, we got good because we wanted to dance to Lee this summer, so we danced Lee's tapes. We wanted to dance to Gully, so we got some of Gully's tapes, so we wanted to dance to Foot, and we got some of his tapes. These guys were known as advanced level and challenge callers. You, Jim, said that you did not have that reputation. In fact, the reputation was that you were a basic level caller. Often I see that the basic level callers have that reputation. How did you overcome that in your area?
I still run into people, many of them, who say, gee, we were surprised to see you calling advanced. I put an ad in our local magazine and said I'm running an A1 class. And some people came and had a good time. And the next year, when I started that class over again, more people came. I think you can only build a program by giving the customers a good time and having them go and tell other customers. When we start a basic class, we get 2 sets, if we're lucky, and give them a good time. They then recruit next year's class. That's true at the advanced level just as it is at the basic level. And I don't have big mobs, but this year's group is bigger than the first 2. And that's super.
I'm John Marshall, Ruston, Virginia. I'd like to make a comment on something that we're seeing happening that I think is ironic and rather pleasant for somebody who's been involved in advance for about 8 years now. We're hearing some comments about how do I overcome this reputation of being a basic caller. How many of you remember, I can't get any bookings, I'm a challenge caller, I'm an advanced level caller, they don't want me, I'm something terrible. Isn't it ironic that we've come that full circle now, and it tells you what's happening in the opinion of most of the dancers and the booking people about advanced level and its place in our activity. I think that's terrific.
Francis Eller from Kansas. How do you handle a situation when you start an advanced club and you have a couple or maybe 2 couples that come in that are not able to handle it?
I tell my wife to talk to him. Somewhere along the line, you're going to have to protect the interests of the group. Not everybody can learn how to square dance. It has nothing to do with advanced level dancing. There are just some people that can't handle it. It's a difficult activity. There is no recreational activity at all that you know of or that I know of that requires instant success with 8 people, whether it's tennis or bowling, whatever the case is. Now you put people into a recreational activity that has, to some extent, a lot of mental stress in terms of being able to succeed, because whoever breaks in that square is going to stand out. Some people can handle it and some people can't. It's difficult. If you have other dance levels in your area that you're calling or that somebody else is calling, it just behooves you to be honest with the people and just mention it to them. Because what it will do is it will aggravate the session, aggravate the rest of the dancers themselves, the dancers themselves who just can't function, and also you. And I think your allegiance is basically to the group. If you have an outlet for them, you really should. I'm quite sure there would be an outlet for them. And it's not easy to go up to tell somebody that perhaps you need a little bit more work at a mainstream plus level before you get involved in the advanced level. More than likely, they will not stop dancing. They'll probably stay in and cause a lot of aggravation. And this is something that you honestly have to deal with. Now, it's really not easy for you or for me to go up to somebody and tell them this is just not for you. But somewhere along the line, I think you're going to have to deal with that.
I don't know if you're going to like this. I'm a devout coward, and I'm always afraid to talk to these people. And I really think you should be a strong leader and talk to them. I agree with that. I've done it maybe 3 times in the 28 years of calling, and it just shakes me up every time. I don't have as much of a problem in that area in my best advanced group because I don't use computers. And I don't use the computers for 2 reasons. One, it's a large group. We'd need 2 computers, and that takes us 20 minutes to square up sometimes. Secondly, I openly admit to you, they freeze these people out. And they don't get to dance too much, and it's not too nice, but I don't know, sometimes I like them handling it rather than me. These people don't leave. They all get in squares by themselves over in the corner, and I look this way. And I'm just as nice to them at coffee break. Hi, how you doing? I said, bad. I said, oh, okay, you hang in there, you know.
I'd like to suggest that the problem is not different at the advanced level than it is at the basic level. I explained to some people last night that I've had success in the last couple of years in my beginner class at actively not encouraging people to continue. I've been able to encourage them not to continue successfully enough so that they don't. Most of the people who have come to my advanced program have danced to me at other levels. I am not recruiting from the outside world very much, and I have found that they welcome reluctantly my suggestion that perhaps they should dance at the plus level a bit longer before they try this. I think you owe it to them.
Yeah, just a thing that came up yesterday in a session we had, and I don't think it ever got fully answered. I'd like your opinions on the degree of, as we call dancing by definition now, that dancers should have prior to entering the advanced level program. Could you give us your feelings on that? We had kind of a stalemate there yesterday.
I'm not so sure I understand exactly what you want. Please restate it again.
Okay, you get plus dancers, right?
Yeah.
And they're going to move on to the advanced level. It's been my experience that most of these dancers do not understand the dancing by definition, or all position dancing as we used to call it.
I see. Yeah.
Therefore, when they get to the advanced level class, we have to retrain them. We have to go back and do the plus figures over again, emphasizing the different positions, because they just don't handle it. You call.
I understand. I think we're handling it rather well. On the introduction to advance, and some Bob Kopman over here and I share it. We do it every other Thursday. On the flyer that we put out, we state that this workshop is Introduction to Advanced, and then we state what we're going to do. And first on that list, if I'm correct, is we will explore the plus basics, and even though it's not the term anymore, it's the term the dancers understand, from the all-position dance concept. 2, we will introduce the advanced basics and workshop them. 3, I guess we give them a syllabus of some kind, with the definitions. But I feel it's important, and I think we're kidding ourselves when we say, we're going to start an advanced workshop. And the reason we're kidding is I kidded myself. I said, you must have mastered the plus basics. It's not because I'm so smart. I was really dumb. And I started a workshop, and I said, this is going to be, you must have mastered the plus basics. And everybody came anyhow, and I didn't know it. I gave them a list of the plus basics when they walked in, and it said on there, you must have mastered every one of these. And the thing I found out over the years, both as a school teacher like you, Red, and in calling, there's 2 things that we have to recognize about square dancers. They don't read and they don't listen. Okay? And I'm not knocking them. I'm just saying that's something you should deal with. Because the second night I got a terrible reputation in the area because they said the stories going out, you screamed and hollered at people and shouted and told them to get out of the place. They screamed and hollered at me. What happened is I called a Dixie Grand. And one guy back there said, you didn't workshop that, knock it off. We paid money to come in here and you're calling all these advanced basics, and yet he was screaming at me. And I mean, I had to stop calling. I said, excuse me, I don't know what you're talking about. And he said, you called it Dixie Grand and you never workshopped it. I said, it's on the plus list that I gave you, and we've said you must have mastered. He said, it's not on the plus list. I belong to a plus club for 5 years, and my caller never called it. All right? And I said, I am showing you the plus list. Please look at it. Please read it. Someone has lied to you, and I feel sorry about that, but I'm telling you the truth. Why are you mad at me? And 2 squares stormed out. The story went around. I told them to get out and hollered at them. And, and that's the way things get distorted. I think we're kidding ourselves, and I kidded myself, and I accept total fault for that. I never will do that again. I tell them we are going to do the plus basics over from the APD. And you know what I do, Red? I have to teach them from day 1. I teach them from day 1 because they don't know them.
Thank you. That's so we all have to do the same thing then, really. I guess it's most of you.
I hate to call you this because I've forgotten your first name, but Fatback, don't hit me.
That's my name.
I would like this to be the last question because I know some of you are interested in the choreography, and we're going to run out of time. Thank you.
The longer I stood there, the more I realized 2 things. Number 1, what I'm fixing to say you may not want to hear. And number 2, there may not be an answer for my question. Let me qualify it very quickly by saying that there's very little advanced square dancing in South Carolina, which is where I'm from. My question is, let me make a statement. Advanced square dancing, unfortunately, has a very bad name in our state. And my question is, how do you overcome that stigma? I was very hard hit by it, and as a result, you know, we had the largest club in the state. We had about 25 squares, and our attendance at our club dances were dropping off. This is not my club. There's 2 callers in our city, and the other caller is the club caller. The attendance was dropping off, and people were saying, we need the advanced. We want to do the advanced. Well, I offered to do it for the club because our club caller was not interested in doing advanced. And the club just flatly refused. They said, we will have no part of that. It'll destroy our club. Since then, our club has gone down to 5 squares, and I'm doing an advanced class with 2 squares. So it really has a bad name.
I will tell you about an experience I had in Columbia, South Carolina, a number of years ago. I don't think I helped the advanced level program there, but it only happened to me once. In any event, if you want to do advanced level dancing and there are dancers in your area that are interested, all you have to do is set up shop and announce the fact that it's available, and don't touch the club. Don't do anything with the club. And those that are interested will come. If you're interested, whether it's 1 square or 2 squares, whatever the case is, start it with 2 squares. And what you're doing is you're servicing the interest of a small group from your big club, whatever it is. And just forget about it. And call to the mainstream club and just take out an ad. If you can't take out any ads because they just won't hear of advanced level dancing in the area, then just print up flyers and put them out at dances. And just go into business. It's as simple as that. I'll tell you later about you probably know.
I can tell them I was there the next year. They met me at the stage and said, if you call like Lee Kopman. I said, I just got here, man. I don't know. And they were big. I call it the best mainstream dance I called it in my life. I was scared to death. Tell you what we'd like to have you do, if you'd please. You good people right here in the center, could we have you come, be kind enough to lift your chairs? It would make enough room for 1 square. And we're going to have Lee go into some choreography work, which I'm sure you're all interested in. You better get your pencils and papers out now. I've seen Lee do this before, and it's just an excellent presentation. No, we're going to need a square.
Oh, I think we got it already.
You got it? Oh, he's got a square. I'm sorry. He already picked. Thank you.
Yeah, I think yeah.
I think he has.
Can we take this out?
Yeah.
How do you think? Okay. Let's take one of the advanced level figures, one of the easiest figures, and I'm selecting this one primarily because it's a move that can also be directed to a mainstream plus group. The mainstream plus list, I think on the mainstream list, do they have partner hinge? I'm serious about this question. Okay. Well, then this is a perfect move, and let me show you some of the possibilities on using a simple move called a quarter through. Have the heads pair off for our purposes, okay? And just touch 1/4 for now. A quarter through really is an extension of a swing through. Instead of turning a half, your first move is to just hinge with the right hand. And then everything else is the same as a swing through would be, where on a swing through you turn half by the right and then by the left. A quarter through is you would hinge first, that takes the place of the swing through, and then the centers would trade. Now look how nice this deals, how you can deal with this. Do a quarter through, hinge and the centers trade. Now that's comfortable, that's not hard to do at all. And you could deal with that at a mainstream level because the dancers should know how to do a hinge and then the centers trade. Let's have the boys run around that girl. Diamonds are also on a mainstream list, plus list, okay? So if you handle a quarter through, and instead of doing it from 2 parallel waves, you just take the 4 girls in the middle to do a quarter through, hinge and the center girl trade, and you're able to set up a nice diamond there, which is a nice way to get into that formation. Do a diamond circulate, and let all the boys swing through and the girls turn back. Now, if we pick up on this business about doing a quarter through you realize is to hinge with the right hand, and wherever you can, you trade with the left hand. Is there anybody here that disagrees with that? Thank you. So, the two boys, let's see what happens now. We have a facing diamond, and you can get dancers to do this. I've done this at national conventions with large mainstream and mainstream plus groups. You can get them to do a quarter through from here, but let's see what the action is. The two boys have right hands, and the rule is you hinge with the right wherever you can trade. So hinge, and they have to finish with a girl. Now let's have all the girls in the middle do a quarter through. Hinge, centers, trade, and if I have the girls do it again, you hinge and trade with the guy. Do that, and you're in pretty good shape. Let's have all the boys trade, the boys run around that girl, bend the line just for now, and everybody here star through. Center four only, touch one quarter. You may be in a formation like this, where the two people are looking out, you got the center four with the right hand. And each time you have any kind of a mini wave with the right hand, you can deal with a quarter through. So, those who can, and there are only four, do a quarter through while the others do a clover leaf. In the middle, let the boy run to the right, you four bend the line, substitute or zoom, whatever you want to do a right or left through, and the center for a star through, and you've accomplished nothing, you're back home. Now this is basically dealing only with a quarter through. Let's see where else we can handle this. Let's have all four girls do a U-turn back. Everybody grab hands, make an animal ring. Now, a quarter through, we realize, starts with the right hand, and then you have to hinge with the left. Now in this case here, from an Alamo ring, this is a little bit harder. Where you have to, trade with the left. But what you do from an Alamo ring, hinge with the right hand. Notice there are four people here in the center. And the rule is after you hinge with the right hand, you're supposed to trade. Well, four boys in this case are going to have to star across to go there. So boys star across, and you've done it. And there's a quarter through from an Alamo ring. Now, you've seen it from a two-faced line. You've seen it from facing diamonds, and you're able to deal with it. When you start to deal with it from a dhar position, it becomes a little bit more difficult. And as somebody who starts to teach this, if you really want to get involved in this one particular move, you should be aware of the degree of difficulty of doing a quarter through from here. The dancers will probably swing a little bit too far. But when you start your quarter through here, your first move, your hinge, will bring you into an Alamo ring. When you're finally there, turn with the left hand halfway. Ready, quarter through. Hinge to the Alamo, turn half by the left, and you've got it. And you could give that direction and that help to the dancers. Even if they didn't know it and you put them in an Alamo ring just like this, here's the way it would sound. Everybody's starting with a right hand quarter through. Hinge, boys star across, go, and you've got it. Initially, I probably would not get involved with dealing with a quarter through from this position when they're first learning it, because it compounds their problem, and I don't know why, but it's a little bit harder to do from here. Let's have all the girls do a U-turn back just for now. Everybody circular, bend the line for now, wherever you are, all right? At the head position, star through, zoom in the middle, center four, star through, and I think you're back home. All right. Sometimes when you deal only, when you're first starting to deal with a wheel through or a square chain through. Now, you should be aware of the fact before you even deal with it that a wheel through or a square chain through is a lead to the right. From a squared up position, it doesn't seem to present much of a problem once you teach it to the dancers. I think it's because you can say when you finish the move, you'll end up leading the couple, facing the couple to the right. You probably will, and if you don't, you should do this. Head couples lead to the right, and that's all. Just stop right there. This is how I would initiate a square chain through. And I'll say to them, when you finish the move we're going to talk about, this is where you'll be. So if you start to screw the whole thing up, just get right over here and everything will be okay. Nobody will get upset with you. And let's have you back up. So at least they know where their ending position is going to be. And then when you finally deal with it, you'll say, heads, ready? Give a right pull by, face in, face your partner, do a left swing through. And when you're through with that, do a left turn through. Walk to the position we talked about, and you've done a square chain through. If you start to deal with a square chain through here, it's a little bit more difficult because your action will be you're going to end up facing to the right as a couple. So there's nobody there for you to look to except a wall. Now, if you know that this presents some degree of difficulty for the dancers, don't do it right away until they get used to the move. I would pass it up. That's how I would deal with it until they're really firm on the square chain through. But from here, it is a little bit of a problem. Do a right and left through for now. Veer to the left, do a Ferris wheel, and you're in pretty good shape. Center four, star through. Okay, swing through, and when you finish, box the knot back where you'll be back home. Let's deal with the move AC-Doocy, which is a super move. I think it should be at a lower level list. It's not too hard, and we've been calling that directional for years. But it's a good move, and it's one that's easy enough to teach. Now, the basic move on the definition of an acey-deucey is for the centers to trade and ends to circulate. Now look at some of the nice things you can deal with here. Have the heads pair off for now and swing through. Look how nice this works out. Do an acey-deucey, and then you can walk to a right and left grand, but don't do it. Okay, back out and square your set for now. Can you imagine doing an acey-deucey to a right and left grand? It's a beautiful move, and it fits in easy. It's just smooth as anything you'll see on any list, whether it's mainstream, plus, or C1 or C2, whatever. Let's have the head two couples. Do me a favor, wheel through. And everybody here, circle up 4, break to a line. Now you don't have to. Now you do not have to clap when you do a wheel through. Now do a right and left through. Let the ladies lead for a Dixie style, do an ocean wave. Now here you're in a left-hand ocean wave, and look how nice this fits in with an acey-deucey. Do an acey-deucey. And do an Allemande left with the corner, and go back and just back up with the partner. Don't promenade, okay? You're in pretty good shape. That's just with this move acey-deucey. But let's see how we can really deal with acey-deucey from another position. If you sit down and you study with your checkers, you'll probably discover this anyway. Have the heads pass through, split the ring round 1 to a line of 4, and everybody here just touch 1/4 for now. Do an all-8 circulate. The girls trade and roll to face each other. The definition of acey-deucey is ends circulate and centers trade. Well, in your circulating formation here, the ends can circulate, those are the girls, by passing through. Your dancers may not be aware of that, but at least you should be aware of it. Maybe you ought to tell them sometime. And, of course, we have the 2 boys in the middle that can trade here. So do an acey-deucey. Boys trade and the girls circulate. All the boys with each other do a partner tag, okay? Then you have a line of 4 facing out. You can call an acey-deucey from here, because an acey-deucey means centers traded and circulate. In this case here, the boys would trade and the girls would trade to the other side. So why don't you do an acey-deucey there? Go ahead, do that. That's good. Everybody touch 1/4. Do an all-8 circulate. Boys run around that girl. Thank you. Center forward, just for our purposes now, veer to the left. Go ahead. And tag the line, go through. Tag the line. Zigzag, box the knot and slide through. The others come down the middle, star through. Veer to the left and bend the line and you're back home again. Okay? I think that some of the interesting things that you may not be aware of, and let me point out to you, come from grand ocean waves, grand lines. Let me show you what I'm talking about. Have the heads wheel through. Forget how to do it. Veer to your left, okay? And the couples hinge. Now, in this case here, most of you, or most callers, will probably deal on their own side. You have 2 face lines on your own side. But within this center of this setup here, you have a 2 face line smack in the middle that you can also deal with. And you might say, and this could be done, and it's certainly easy enough for them to see, the center 2 face line only deal with each other and wheel and deal. Same for a sweep 1/4 while the others bend the line. Now, this is not on the advanced level list, but these are some things you could look for when you're starting to deal with choreography at any level. There wasn't a call there that was called on any of the higher lists. That's strictly mainstream or mainstream plus dancing. Let's have the centers pass through for now. And everybody here pass the ocean. Most of the time, callers will not call past the ocean from an 8 chain through position. They'll probably call it from a line of 4. But in this setup here, you have 2 waves on your own side, as you can see, but you also have a center right-hand wave. Let's have everybody do a grand swing through. Turn right and then by the left. And look at your center right-hand wave. Why do you think I called the grand swing through first? I'm going to work with this center wave. Does anybody know out there? Exactly, because it created a normal wave. And one of the teaching techniques that you should be aware of is this, that if you're going to create an unusual situation, don't compound the problem of the dancers. If you're going to isolate the center wave, then make it a wave that they can see with 2 boys on the end and the girls in the middle. Let's have the center wave only. This is nice. What I would say, center wave, you'll deal with each other, identify it, that's a term I've been using for the past couple of years, and spin the top. The others box the knot and slide through. In the middle, let the boy run to the right. You 4 do a wheel and deal, the same for a pass through, star through, and you got some real nice dancing there, and that's not hard to do. Now, you probably will discover some of these things when you force yourself to deal with your checkers when you start to learn some of the advanced level dancing. This is the point I think Clark was trying to make before when he said, and I'm glad he brought it out, when you're dealing with advanced level dancing, do you find any change in the way you deal with the choreography at a mainstream plus level? And the answer is absolutely yes. Because when you start to study your material at a higher level, it just forces you to look at the checkers and the formations and what the possibilities are. And of course, the fact that, I'm here and Dave here and Jim is here to point some of these things out for you, these are the things that you should really look for. It doesn't have to be very difficult in order for it to be good. You can get a lot of good dancing out of very simple formations. All right, let's have everybody do a right and left through. Roll the girl with a half sachet. Center forward, deal with each other. Do a right and left through while the others star through in cloverleaf. The four in the middle pass through and circle up four and break to a line. Everybody here, watch this. Touch 1/4. Do it all eight, circulate. Let's have the center four only. I'm going to have them do a walk and dodge. Not yet. Why did I have them circulate first? Because the boys are the walkers. Now, this is the problem that we create ourselves. And the reason that I did this is to protect myself with a group that may not be familiar with having the boys walk first. But if a dancer only knows how to do a walk and dodge with the boy walking across and the girl sliding over, it's not their fault. That's just the way you taught them. And there's no reason why dancers should not be able to learn how to do a walk and dodge with 4 girls or 4 boys. It'll make it easier when you start to deal with it. But here we had a column. I had them circulate, and then I'm going to deal only with the centers. Centers only do a walk and dodge. They'll hardly miss that. I mean, that's easy enough to see. We took the centers out of the whole setup, and we dealt with it. I didn't want to create a big problem by having a girl as a walker, but rather than a boy. Look at this kooky setup here. Can we deal with this? We can. And I'm going to show you how. Just watch. All the girls pass through and face in. Boys only peel off. Boys bend the line, and you're in a line of 4, and you're dancing real nice. That is not hard to do. Not hard to get dancers to do. Let's have the ends star through. Want to see something nice? Let's have the centers touch 1/4. Are the girls facing? Everybody can see that. And that's not hard to deal with. Look how nice this will dance. Girls pass through. Those in the center fan the top to a recycle while the others trade and roll. Beautiful dancing. As good as anything you could see. Not hard. Notice how we gave it to them. That creates a problem for them. We're giving them 2 calls, so you have to make sure you're clear. And you say, centers, fan the top, and when you're through, recycle. While the others trade and roll, and you got a beautiful formation. Let's have everybody touch 1/4. All 8 circulate. Let's deal only with the boys in the middle. Do a walk and dodge. Those who can star through, the others 1/4 in, and you got a line formation of some kind. Bend the line of 4 and all touch 1/4. Very simple things. Nothing too hard. Now, how did I discover all these things? Believe me, I'm not a genius. The only way I was able to discover these things is when I started to deal with some of these figures and worked with the checkers. And I wanted to keep it interesting for the dancers, and I just get tired of calling the same thing all the time. And these are some of the things that develop. And that's what you're supposed to look for as a caller at any level, no matter what you're dealing with. And the stuff will dance good, and it'll be interesting. Take the centers, take the ends, have the centers do one figure, have the ends do another. Don't compound their problem if you're going to create centers and work with them with something that may be difficult in terms of having a girl walk and a boy dodge. So those are the things that you should be aware of. I think, everybody circulate here. Let's have all the girls turn back, okay? Center forward, pass through, star through with the outside 2. Fan the top, would you please? Do a right and left through with the outside 2. Just getting them back. Pass to the center and pass through. Pass to the center. Center is veer to the left. You won't like that, but do it anyway. Bend the line and you're back home, okay? But what I'm trying to say to you is this, that in the business of choreography, there's a lot with what we have now that you can deal with if you just sit down and you take a minute to investigate what some of these possibilities are. We took the 1/4 through, and I showed you how to deal with that. We showed you the AC-doocy, the possibilities where the ends are facing and the center 4 in a mini wave. There are all kinds of things with chain reaction that are great, even at an advanced level at the A1 figure. Let me show you this, and you can get dancers to do this. Have the heads pass the ocean. Is there a problem on chain reaction here? Okay. Now, let's do a basic chain reaction. Go. Walk ahead. Turn there. Boy meet a boy and a girl walk up. There doesn't seem to be any problem, even though Dave is in that set. Let's have all the boys run around that girl and do a Ferris wheel for now in the center 4, make an ocean wave. Now, when you're dealing with chain reaction, the people that come into the middle turn the star 1/4, and a boy turns a boy. Is that correct? Well, you can turn that star 3/4, and you'll still have a boy turning a boy. And if you want to get your dancers' immediate attention, you just try that. You say, turn your star 3/4, and they'll start to look, and you help them, you see, because you compounded their problem with a 3/4. But the same sex is going to meet anyway. It's just a different guy. Let's see how it looks. Chain reaction. But turn the star 3/4, a boy will meet a boy. And you help them. There are 2 reasons why you help. There are 2 reasons why I help. Number 1, they have so much to learn. It's overwhelming. And number 2, by the time I finish directing it to them, it helps me to time out the figure. That's the reason that I work that way. I teach them, and I call it directional so that it will help them, number 1, and number 2, it helps me to know when the figure is going to be over. Let's have the boys run around the girl for now. Do a wheel and deal. Pass to the center and pass through. Pass to the center and start through, and you're back home. One of the nicest things, one of the nicest figures is a horseshoe turn. Let's have the head start through. Do a double pass through. Now, most of the time, your horseshoe turn, don't do it yet, will be done from this way, where the lead 2 people will cloverleaf and the center 4 will do a partner tag. Do we agree? Okay, let's have the center 4 work behind yourselves and chase to the right. Go. Sometimes you can be in this position and still call a horseshoe turn. It still fits with basic definition. The center 4 can do a partner tag with each other. Now watch how I get their attention here. Everybody do a horseshoe turn. Go. Centers go twice. Right away we get their attention. All they had to do is 2 partner tags. If you're looking out, step forward in California twirl. Everybody join hands, circle to the left, halfway from there, and you'll be back home. And that's dealing just with a horseshoe turn, and it's not hard to deal with that. And to make that interesting, too, because, once your dancers learn how to do advanced level dancing, you don't have to go to C1 to make it interesting. See, you can make it very interesting at the C1 level by investigating what some of these possibilities are. That's very important. Anybody have any questions they want to deal with? Yes. State your name, please.
I feel like Dave Taylor. Mike Foley, New Jersey. I have a question. If I could set up for you, I have a question on the quarter through you did before. Is it possible to do this? Sides, please pass through. And if the heads would pass the ocean. And hinge. Okay, you had them set up something similar to this, a box within a couple facing out, and you had those in the box through the 1 quarter through. According to the definition, it says those who can partner hinge. Is that correct?
A quarter through? No.
Quarter by the right.
Now, what you're saying?
Resolves the question. What I was asking, if all 8 could do a 1 quarter through by having those facing out at the sides do a partner hinge to start.
I would say no.
You would have to ask them to do a partner hinge first.
I would deal only with the centers, yes.
Okay, thank you.
What you do, it starts from a mini wave. That's the important thing that you should realize, okay? Square is set up here. Clark, you want the square up?
It doesn't matter.
Okay.
This is Clark Baker from Watertown, Massachusetts again. A lot of what you've shown us has had us in temporarily unusual formations that if I were just going along sight calling and accidentally got to one of those, I'd go, oh my God, how am I going to get out of this? And you get out of them all very smoothly. Do you have any suggestions? Presumably you'd probably want to be a sight caller to do this kind of stuff, unless you tried to actually memorize all of it, which I think would be tough. Do you have some suggestions for how not to get scared when you have lines of 4 facing? You say, hey, let's have the centers curly Q, and then they can box circulate while the ends might, do their part of load the boat and that kind of stuff?
Clark, at that point now, what you get into the whole business of learning how to sight call and resolve these unusual formations. And we could stand here for hours and show you how to take some of these things and how to break them down so you can normalize what I call a normalized situation. Let me just deal with a little bit, okay? And I'll show you, if you're at caller schools, these are the kind of things that we deal with. One of the things that you really must learn how to do if you're going to deal with a multitude of figures is you really must learn how to sight call. And that's not easy. If you go to any school where they say it's easy to learn how to sight call, call me up, okay, and we'll talk about it. Because it is not easy to sight call. You have to click these things off in your mind, see certain pictures, and it has to be done quick. So it's really hard. It has to become part of your language. Just so that when dancers learn how to do a right and left through, initially, at the first class, they say, well, you give a right pull by, and then you pull, face your partner, and then you courtesy turn. And it takes a few weeks before that becomes second nature to them. And it's the same thing with this, the sight calling. But some of the things you run into is this. Let me show you. Have the head start through. Everybody do a double pass through. And all for our purposes now quarter in. And pass through. Now, this is a basic formation. Now, if you do not know how to resolve this so that this formation, not back to an Alaman left, becomes some kind of a normal thing you can deal with, then you've got a serious problem. And you might have to study this. And the way you would study this is you would say, well, I'm going to put these dancers in lines of 4 with 2 girls and 2 boys. What are the possibilities? How can I normalize it so that you'll all get some kind of a partner affiliation close to you? Well, one of the easiest things to do would be this. Do a wheel and deal, please. Have the girls pass through and everybody start through with a girl. And this is an easier kind of a formation to work with. Have the boys walk and dodge in the middle. This is a problem. What are we going to do to deal with this? How do we resolve this? So when you start to study these things, you might set up these formations where you say, well, this is a 3-in-1 line. 3-in-1 lines mean 3 people are looking out, 1 person is looking in. But there is a way to deal with this whole thing. Let's have the boys run. And the boys roll. Girls slide together, trade. Girls will roll to face each other. Girls pass through, star through, and you've got it. Now, that just didn't come to me. This takes years and years of study in order to develop this whole thing. Let's have everybody bend the line of 4, and only the centers touch a quarter. This is an unusual setup. Well, what are you going to do? Well, you can have the ends star through. You can do that. Why don't you do that? But you still created a problem. Suppose you don't want to deal with walk and dodge. Suppose you want to you have to learn how to deal with this. This is a formation. All right. If you don't want to walk and dodge, have the centers trade and roll. Do that. That's easy enough to do. Now you got another problem because you got all same sexes together. Well, you can have, don't do this, but the centers can pass through, separate around 1, or you can have join 16, circle 8 this way. Go ahead, do that, circle 8. Have all 4 girls move to the middle, and the girls square through 2 hands. When you meet some guy pass through, do a U-turn back and star through. The thing is this, Clark, what happens is you get all these different unusual formations, and the only way to do this thing is to sit down, write down some of these unusual formations for yourself. 4 men in the middle. Girls around the outside, facing in the same direction or back to back, and say, now what could I do with this in order to normalize it? And normalize it means to get them into this kind of a situation, or 2 parallel ways with either the boys in the middle or the girls on the end, and study the different possibilities. Write down some things. And then when you go to a dance, try to implement them in the dance when you're calling. And then eventually you'll learn some of these things. Just take 2 or 3. And do that for 6 months until you get used to it. Then add another one, just the basic formation with 2 men in the middle and the girls on the outside. Just 1 at a time. You won't pressure dancers that much, they'll love you for it. Square sets. Clark, does that answer your question? Okay. Yeah, well, we have to go now. I hope you've enjoyed the session. If you have any questions during the week, we'd be glad to talk to you. Thank you for coming.
Thank you very much, Lee, Jim. And be sure to pay attention at lunchtime. We have a couple important announcements.
Everybody?